So now I have to tell a little bit of an incident that it's a bit of a walk down memory lane about how the song Govindam Purusham came into existence. It was recorded in a recording studio called Trident. We called it Trident. It's like Lord Shiva's Trident, spelled like that, Trident, Trident Studios. Probably doesn't exist anymore, but it was very modern. And it was done in that studio in a place called St. Anne's Alley, which is just off, almost in the center of London, off of Tottenham Court Road, near an underground station called Goodge Street. And it's just about 300 meters down the road, and it's called St. Anne's Alley. And the British, having a very bizarre sense of humor, used to call it Sin Anne's Alley instead of St. Anne's Alley. Anyway, the recording studio was slightly underground. You went down a long stairway to the studio, and the studio was approximately 1.5 times the size of this room. Very state-of-the-art, very modern. It wasn't recorded in EMI studios where the Beatles made a lot of their recordings, but because of contracts that George Harrison had with EMI or whatever, the recording was done in a different place called Trident Studios. At that point in time, Trident Studios was a very modern, very well-appointed and very modern, under one flight down recording studio. And the background of this was that George Harrison one day came to Berry Place, and this was about a year and a half after the Hare Krishna Mahamantra was released on Apple Records. And he came up with his guitar to Berry Place. That was where the original temple in London was located, in Berry Place, with his guitar. And he asked the devotees, I was there with Yamuna and Gurudas and a few other people, what are you guys doing these days? And so we told him that we were chanting in a place called the Arts Lab, which was one of the few places in London where hippies could gather. And so we sang to him this Govindam Purusham, just like we did at the Arts Lab, which was about 2 blocks away from Berry Place, and almost in the very geographic center of London. In the very geographic center, Oxford Street crosses Tottenham Court Road. That is the very geographic center. And there's a very tall building there called Center Point, which had fountains in it, and it was unoccupied. It was about 50 stories tall, and that's a whole other story. But just very near that was St. Anne's Alley or Trident Studios, and one of the reasons why they called it St. Anne's Alley was it was very close to the red light district of London. That was very near where the temple is now located, in what they call Soho. And in the Soho section, which is about 20 square blocks of England, there's a lot of prostitution, meeting, gambling. The casinos are very brightly lit up, all 24 hours a day, especially at night. And there's a lot of meat being served in all the restaurants, and it's just a very sinful place. So anyway, after when we were saying this to George, he decided that he would make on his guitar chords to the song. So I don't know if you know anything about music, but the chords were C minor, B flat major, A flat major, B major, and C minor again. Govindam Purusham. And if you listen closely, you can hear the instruments. It was a very big room, not very huge room, but about maybe 1.5 times the size of this temple. And there was a flute player named Hari Prasad. At that time, was a very famous flute player. Violins, violas, cellos, orchestral bells. They were tubular bells that hung down from a horizontal beam. And then there was a harp to give it a kind of celestial flavor, and a Hammond organ. And there were about 20 voices. I was the choir director of the singers. They were all devotees, and they were, as they sang, they were kind of swaying back and forth like grown wheat in a wheat field under a breeze. They were all in unison, dancing together and singing. And then there was a Hammond organ that I was playing, and there's a control room. About halfway up the stairway was the control room. It was also below street level, and there was a big sheet of glass and a big, about 2 meter long mixing console. And it was about 1 meter this way, vertically, not exactly vertically, but opposite to horizontal. And it was laying down. It was about maybe 1 foot thick. And the dials were these things that you push. It was a 16-track console, and the music was mixed very expertly. The mridanga and the kartals had to be played in a separate room in the recording studio behind what the recording engineers called a baffle, because the ringing of the kartals in the very high partials would distort the other instruments. So the mridanga and kartals were played in a separate room behind a baffle so that they wouldn't distort things, and there were probably, a whole room full of musicians. And the recording was mixed later on this big console by George Harrison. He, being familiar with recording studios, he knew how to mix things. And if you listen closely to the recording, you can hear the harp and the viola, violins, and the organ, and I was playing a Hammond organ. We took, I think it was 2 takes before it was done, and you can hear the many voices singing. A little later on, I'm going to read some eyewitness accounts of. Well, I was in England at this time. Prabhupada was in India, but he heard about it, and someone in England had sent Prabhupada a copy of the recording, and I have a copy of what the recording looked like this. I'll just pass this around, and anyone who wants to keep it can keep it. This is what the front cover looked like, and the back cover, it looked something like a little different, but it had the words of the song, and this is what the backside was like. So it was released as a small 45 RPM record, and vinyl they call it. And someone managed to send it to Prabhupada, and he heard it, but he listened to it on a very primitive kind of record player, and he didn't hear it very well. So at his request, it was played in the temple. There was a big controversy over the whole thing because Yamuna, who was leading the kirtan. Oh, and another instrument was the Armenian oud. You can hear it after the voice sings. And Hari Vilas, who is from that country, played. It's kind of like a mandolin or a guitar or a balalaika, but it's made in Armenia, and it's got that kind of guitar sound to it. So he was playing, and then we went up to the recording studio to watch George Harrison mix it. And then later on, he called on a drummer named Alan White and an electronic bass player named Klaus Vorman. So it was 16 tracks, but then they on a separate date, these people came in to be added to the mix. So it was a classical sounding thing, but it had a kind of rock beat to it because this drummer was playing trap drums like they play in rock music and jazz music, with a big bass and a hi-hat and a snare drum and all that. So it had a kind of rock beat to it. And Prabhupada liked it. So this is one account that's on a website called BeatlesBible.point.com. George Harrison produces Govinda. Following the success of the Hare Krishna mantra single by Radha Krishna Temple, plans for a follow-up were made in early 1970. Another traditional chant, Govinda, was chosen. George Harrison produced the session and also played acoustic guitar. That's another thing, that he was, and apart from being in the control room, he was playing his guitar at one of the sessions. Klaus Vorman played bass guitar, while Alan White was the drummer. And then Prabhupada wrote to Shamsundar in 1970, in February, "Please accept my blessings. I beg to acknowledge receipt of your letter dated 16 February 1970, along with the Govindam record. I have heard it played on a record player, and although the machine was not very good, still I enjoyed the transcendental vibration very much." So he wanted to hear it in the temple room. Prabhupada asked that it be played on the speakers in I don't know if any of you have been to the Los Angeles temple, but the speakers are about this high off the ground. And they're up near the ceiling. There's 2 of them, one on the left and one on the right. So Prabhupada wanted to hear them on the big speakers so he could catch all the low notes and the high notes and all the high fidelity So this is a chapter from Dhanavir Prabhu's book called Srila Prabhupada. The next morning, a moving experience takes place. Srila Prabhupada enters the temple room from the side door, and as soon as the deity doors are opened for greeting, an audio cassette tape of the Govindam plays from the new London album. It's played for the first time over the sound system. Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. When the altar's folding doors are opened, robust clouds of fragrance billow forth from the frankincense and myrrh incense smoldering upon 2-inch round charcoals. His divine grace leads the devotees in slowly offering full prostration before each of the 3 temple altars. Dutifully taking his seat on the red velvet canopy-covered throne, on the red velvet canopy-covered throne of honor, constructed by his disciple Narayan Das, gazing from the Vyasasan upon the gorgeously dressed deities and hearing the precious prayers of Brahma, so sweetly composed, the gentle guru is stunned with spiritual emotions. I mean, the controversy was that that Prabhupada, first of all, that it shouldn't be played in the temple because, after all, it was produced by a karmi, and second of all, a woman's voice was leading the whole thing. But Prabhupada insisted that it be played on the big speaker system while the Guru Puja was taking place. Gazing from the Vyasasan upon the gorgeously dressed deities and hearing the precious prayers of Brahma, so sweetly composed, the gentle guru is stunned with spiritual emotions. Irrepressible tears glide down from his cheeks even as the song ends in silence. And as the devotees are granted an intimate exchange, from this day forward, Prabhupada requests the movement's centers to daily play the Govindam prayers upon greeting the deities, which I think is still done all over the world. And then there's another person, he was an eyewitness to this thing, and there's another person who was an eyewitness named Bhakta Das. And then Bhakta is a little kind of emotional and dramatic but I'll read what he said anyway. This has been published in the Memoirs books. I was there in Los Angeles when the Govindam prayers were played for the first time in the history of ISKCON. I don't know if it was the very first time in the history of ISKCON, but as Prabhupada entered the temple room, Vishnu Jan turned on the Govindam tape after Prabhupada offered his obeisances to the deities and sat on his Vyasasan. He was feeling such ecstasy that tears were shooting from his eyes. That's what he says. Tears were shooting from his eyes, like serum comes out of a syringe. Those of us who were sitting at the bottom of the Vyasasan were getting showered by Prabhupada's tears, literally showered. You could feel his tears that were shooting out of love. That was on Memories DVD number 79. And about 4 years ago, a devotee named Karuna Dharani was writing for Back to Godhead magazine. And this was published in about 4 years ago, in about 2020. And she writes that Srila Prabhupada became stunned when he heard this. His body shivered and tears streamed from his eyes. In the silence of the moment, the devotees chanted softly. Finally, Srila Prabhupada repeated the refrain from the song, Govindam Adi Purusham Tamham Bhajami. And according to one account, he actually sang along with it. And then, in 1975, I don't know when this took place, because probably it was actually not, it took about 6 months for it to be released from the time it was recorded. But another devotee wrote to Prabhupada, and he said he didn't like the fact that it was played in all the temples. Prabhupada was in India at the time. I was in England, and there were a lot of devotees in New Dwarka in Los Angeles. So he writes to him, please accept my blessings. I'm in receipt of your letter dated December 2nd, 1975. No! Exclamation point. You have made some discovery. All along you have been hearing the recording of Yamuna Devi, and now you want to change it. It is not ordinary singing. And this phrase is, he says, it is concert, is an important phrase. It is concert. Many people are singing, so it is not bad. Just like Sankirtan, many voices are there, men and women. So it is the same thing. Sankirtan. I approve of it. Here in Krishna Balaram Temple, he was in Vrindavan, we are hearing the same recording every morning. So if it is good here, why not there? Question mark. I hope this finds you well. That's the end of the letter. And then, This is, there was a conversation that took place between Prabhupada and some devotees in Mayapur on March 20th, 1977. Tamal Krishna says, John Lennon, Govindam record playing in the background, Prabhupada, sounding physically quite weak. At that time, I used to come to Conway Hall. It took at least 1 hour. Then they inquired. In that car, I was singing with this tune, Govindam Adi Purusham. So they adjusted this word, George, Mukunda, and ... Tamal Krishna, Yamuna, Prabhupada, and took up this tune. I was repeating. They were chanting within the car while coming from Conway Hall. This is intelligence, Prabhupada, Tamal Krishna. Not to do anything new, simply to explain in one's own way. Prabhupada, this song was favorite to me since a very, very long time. Pause. This album was very popular in Europe and America. And then another conversation, he said that this song was favorite to me since very, very long time. This album was very popular in Europe and America. So those are some of the reasons that this was very much liked by Prabhupada, and the main reason why it is played in all the temples all over the world. So if anyone wants to add anything or ask anything, now is the time.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. I'm just curious how you came about to select those two particular verses from Brahma Samhita, because there's 50 plus verses in the Brahma Samhita. Did you sort of get together and go through them all, or how did you come up with just those two particular verses for the recording?
Those are the two verses that Prabhupada taught us to sing. He didn't teach us the whole thing. They're from the 5th chapter of the Brahma Samhita. And those are the two verses that we sang at the art lab. We went once a week to this place called the Arts Lab and chanted, and eventually they just put us in a little room off to the side that was up a stairway, and the ceiling and the walls and everything was painted black. That's why those two verses were used. They're the two verses that Prabhupada taught us to sing, and he sang them himself.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,